I know you guys thought I forgot. Episode 119, intellectual property rights. Yeah, anything Pete and John say can be used against them in a court of law.
Fantastic. That's wonderful.
I don't know if we needed to remind people of it.
Yeah.
You're tuned into the Rebel's Edge, folks. So if you want to just chatter and chit-chat, well, lots of places I could suggest. However, we're delighted you chose to come here. We will give you a total of 1 minute of banter about macro, and then we're going to dive into 4 stocks, our reaction to those 4 stocks and the news that affected them, as well as unusual activity, and then maybe a little bit of sports. We've got some interesting stuff today. All right, let's get started, shall we, Pete? Let's jump right into the 1 minute macro. Higher mortgage rates. That was pretty negative for houses that were for sale in December because people were basically forced to take less. In fact, they were down, not overall, but as parts of the country were down as much as 10 and 11%. Most of the country was up a grand total of 4%, which was down from 7.6% in November. Bang. Your turn, Pete.
All right, I'm going to get you exactly 30 seconds, Jeff, by the way, John. Nicely done. I'm going to tell you this. Brian Cornell, I'm going to steal a line from him today. Inflation is sticky. That's really true. Look at the 10-year. It's sticky. It's right near 4. Look at the dollar, right near those highs of 105 recently. So a lot going on from that perspective, John. And sticky, I think, is exactly the right word because that is what we're seeing right now as far as the whole macro of inflation.
That's right. Very sticky. And I'm not going to use any of Pete's phraseology there as we go into HIMS, which happens to be a product that helps men with various sexual problems that they'd like to address.
And women.
And women, but it's called HIMS.
Well, HIMS and hers.
HIMS and hers.
Right.
Believe it or not, Pete, this is a $2 billion enterprise that these guys have built already, the leading healthcare and wellness platform on the net. And they just keep blowing it out with earnings. And yes, it is not just sexual performance or problems. It is also, Pete, hair. So maybe HIMS should be sponsoring this show because they'll sell you stuff that'll make what little hair you've got thicker and all the rest. What do you got to say about HIMS, Pete?
Well, you got me laughing. You got me laughing, and for all the right reasons. The stock is reacting really well. It's really perked up, so to speak. And and you talked about, you don't want to blow this. I don't know where to go with that. And then just for that, then it's swelling with subscribers. I mean, honestly, it's got every single one of these things. We're talking about 1 million subscribers. So yeah, it is swelling. But John, the numbers that these guys produced and the growth, I mean, the growth is just swelling up like I've never seen before. I mean, the growth is at 90 some odd %, right? I mean, everything, it all ties in together with this whole thing. Gross margins up like you wouldn't believe, 79%. Whether you're looking at the quarter or year, it's been unbelievable. These guys have executed. They've done everything right, so it seems. They still have earnings at a loss, but that doesn't bother me as much with these guys, John, because at the growth rate that they've got, literally, I think that they're going to be able to be a company that's absolutely on fire and ripping to the upside. This is one you better keep a close eye on, honestly. I think they are doing something that everybody in the country and the world really is looking for some answers to. And because of that, these guys are killing it.
And they do it all online. Doctors and everything prescribed to the patients online. So it makes it really easy, but easier than going to a doctor's office. So you could even call it a telehealth play, Pete. Oh. And like Charlie Sheehan said in the first Wall Street, I'd jump on it. All right, let's talk about IGT, International Game Tech. This one, some pretty phenomenal numbers here, Pete. 4 beats in a row. They've come out and beat on earnings estimates 4 times in a row. Now, some of you will say, well, yeah, that's because the street that follows them does a bad job of estimating. Well, after one or two, you'd think that fool me once or twice, they move their numbers up pretty quick, but they can't keep up with IGT, Pete. And that's why it's up so good today.
You know, John, when you look a year ago, they earned 9 cents. This year, they're looking for 33 cents. They earned 40 cents. So you're exactly right. They are beating the street, and they're beating it every single quarter. And when you look at some of the growth, but when you look at the free cash flow, you're always looking for different things. That's one of them that I was just looking at. How about $1 billion of free cash flow that these guys have got? When you look at the quarterly growth and everything that they're doing, it's off the charts as well. This is a company, it might seem kind of ridiculous. It might even seem a little bit boring, but you wouldn't be too bored when you look at what the stock reaction has been as well. So they've crushed it. They continue to crush it, John. And obviously post-pandemic, everybody back into all those casinos, everything else. This is a stock that's done very well, and I think can continue to do very well. So it's one that I think you better have on your radar as well. I think these first two stocks, take a nice long look because they've got a lot of strong possibilities, I think, on both of them.
Yeah. And beginning of the year, Pete, it was a $22 stock. It is now 27, let's call it. The 52-week high is 29.30. So yeah. And I emphasize this all the time about IGT because we get a lot of readings on this one with Market Rebellion's unusual option activity scanner. And one of the things I'll point out is they get royalty revenue. In other words, they don't just sell a slot machine in Vegas, whether it's video poker or one-arm bandit. Basically, people just press buttons now. They don't pull the bandit arm. But they get a little bit of a spiff every time somebody uses those machines. It's not just a one-off sale. They get a percentage. So keep that in mind. All right. What about this one, Pete? EverQuote. Symbol EVER, down hard today because basically quarterly loss was pretty much in line with what they were thinking they would lose. These guys are a consolidator of insurance quotes on the internet. So we already talked about HIMS. These guys, insurance, they're not doing quite as well as HIMS, Pete.
They are not. They're not even close. And they have a hard time, John, in terms of their earnings themselves. They were losing money last year. They continue to lose money this year. This quarter was terrible once again. They were down, lost another 26 cents. When you look across the board, John, they're talking, this is an area where you're going on, you're trying to shop for your insurance, and auto is one of the areas. It's down 6%. That's not that terrible, but nonetheless, it is down. But then when you look at the revenue for the rest of everything else that people are searching for out there, down 33%. That's a pretty terrible number as well. That's why with the revenue miss, you're looking at a company that's really kind of flailing around right now, John. I would not be chasing this one. I would not be trying to bottom pick on this one because I still think they could still fall a little bit further. I'm not impressed with what they put up. I'm sure nobody else is either, but I don't see any answers to why that's going to change anytime in the next couple of quarters.
Well, and it gives you an idea too, Pete, of with the case of HIMS, just to bring it back to that, no puns, no jokes, but that's a $2.3 billion company. Insurance, that's a lot easier for people to compete with than what HIMS has built. And that's why it's only a $400 million company. And as you say, they got to start making money one of these days, Pete.
Yep.
HIMS doesn't make money yet either, but they're a younger company. And I'd say their model works a little better than the model over at Ever, unfortunately. All right. Or at least unfortunately, if you're a fan of EverQuote. NCLH, Pete, also down hard today. Norwegian Cruise Lines was down in the pre-market. It just keeps falling. A lot of pressure because even though their revenue numbers are good, Pete, the costs, everything that goes into what they do, all the food that they serve, all the liquor that they serve, all of the fuel oil that they use to drive those big ships, all of it costs more money. So it's really okay, revenue's up, but their earnings are down because of those costs.
Yeah, operating expenses, John, absolutely off the charts. When you look at food and you look at energy, it's just like looking at that, economically, we look at that all the time, right? And we talk about that. This is something that's absolutely affecting this company. And John, When you talk about a cash burn of $1 billion, things are getting pretty rough. It's amazing because everybody is so excited. People are going on cruises, but the problem is they can't make that price high enough to be able to cover what the expenses really are right now. That's a huge problem. I'm not interested in the stock. I might be interested in going on a great cruise because everybody I talk to absolutely loves these things. But outside of that, I don't like the business model right now at all, John, until that changes. And all you got to do is check out the price of crude. Watch crude, know about the food prices. Everybody talks about eggs. It's not just eggs. It's across the board, just about everywhere you look. I was just in the grocery store the other day, John, talking to one of the meat guys about, hey, what was this sirloin just, however long, 3 months ago? And he'd say, well, 21 bucks. Now it's 27 bucks. That's a lot. That's a big jump. And I don't think everybody fully embraces exactly what we're talking about when we say food inflation is really there, along with what you're seeing in the fuel side of things. That's what's killing Norwegian right now.
Yep. Well, let's get into unusual option activity. We need some sort of a bell or something to introduce that, Pete. But I'll tell you what mine is today. It's LAZR. This one, the numbers, Pete, are staggering, especially for a small stock. It's a $9 stock, folks. And they were buying 70,000 of the April 8 calls. Now, why would they do that? That's an in-the-money call because the right to buy it at 8 when it's trading at $9.15 is worth $1.15. And then a little premium because these will exist until the third Friday in April. Well, what did the trader do? They sold April 12 calls against the April 8 calls. So they paid about, let's say, $2 for the one that they bought. They collected in the neighborhood of 70 cents for the one they sold, which means they paid $1.30 for a spread that could go to $4. That's pretty interesting. That's a smart trader who, instead of carrying, for instance, 7 million shares of a $9 stock, they converted that over into carrying 7 million share equivalent through the options for a lot less money, Pete, for $1.15 instead of $9. That's a smart trader. I like to follow the smart money. That's why I was in this one, Pete.
Yep. Interesting one for sure, John. And the size is absolutely staggering. I got one for you with a firm. Now, am I a huge fan of this company? Absolutely not. But I am a huge fan of trying to follow some of that smart money that you and I talk about all the time out there in the options world as well. This is a stock, believe it or not, a firm has done very well year to date. The stock was $9, got all the way up to 21. Then it had a little bit of a pullback. Today, we're seeing a little bit of a spike. By the way, a year ago, this was a $46 stock. So it gives you an idea that this is a stock that's been hammered, but this year it's actually been following itself in a little bit of a nice path to the upside. So the interesting thing about this, a company, a firm, those who don't really know this, this is buy now, pay later. So they're in that whole financial world that can be a little bit muddy sometimes, and they are certainly one of those that's part of that. The stock was trading close to 13 bucks. It was just under 13, traveled all the way up to about 13.60. We had a nice buyer, 4,500 of the March 3rd. Yeah, that means Friday. These expire very, very rapidly, but the 14 strike calls were just out of the money from where these were, at where the stock was at the time. 20 cents up to about 45 cents for those options, depending on where the stock was. They started to move up because the stock moved significantly higher once those buyers started to step in there. I like this one as well, John. You were just talking about LAZR. I like what we're seeing in a firm, and here's another reason why. A very high short interest. These are those types of stocks, meme stocks, where you get a little bit of a squeeze happening. Who knows? Doesn't mean it's going to happen, but it certainly could because of the short interest there. Folks get a little bit nervous. It starts moving to the upside. It could make a dramatic move to the upside. That's one of the catalysts that I'm looking for over the next couple of days.
No, I agree. I think that one is primed for a short squeeze. Some of that'll depend on the market, but if they catch it just right, Pete, and if Tesla, for instance, can help lift the market tomorrow on the analyst day, well, then you might see this one really kick in before Friday. So I like the trade. What do you got on the sports side, Pete?
Well, I thought we'd mix a little sports with finance here, John. I mean, we try to do that once in a while, but most of the time we're just getting just to the fun part of sports, right? But this one is about owners and this guy Haslam, who now, once again, John, wants to be a part of something, already bought the Cleveland Browns and very happy about that. This is a guy who started off his career and made his money from Flying J, if anybody's familiar with that, those pilot Flying Js, those big, operations out there, gasoline. If you've been ever across the country, you know what I'm talking about. But John, I think what's really interesting is you and I both know Mark Lazary pretty decent. And here's a guy who's pretty damn sharp guy, I think, and how he maneuvers and where he decides to go. Bought the Bucks, the Milwaukee Bucks basketball team, NBA team, $550 million in 2014. Here we are in 2023. He's now selling it at $3.5 billion valuation level. He doesn't own the entire team, but he's selling out his piece at a $3.5 billion number. Now, the interesting part about that is the Nets in 2000, now this is New York Nets, 2019, there was $2.3 billion. That was a transaction. Houston, $2.2 billion. Our buddy in the food industry there. The Clippers, $2 billion from that crazy man from Microsoft. So when you look at all of that, John, you start to piece together, is it really still, I mean, what is it that people are seeing right now that we are missing as far as the NBA? And here's why I'd say that. So it really did explode when Ballmer decided to go out there, obviously, with the Clippers, right? I mean, that's when we saw reality being lost and people going to a different level. The 1990s is the last time that we saw great ratings for the NBA. Why was that? Well, it seems like a guy named Michael Jordan might have been playing back then, John. But he's gone, and what have the ratings done? They've gone lower, 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 and in 2020, they were at their lowest level. They're still near those lower levels. They're clearly off of that lowest level of 2020. But I'll tell you what, John, I just wonder, with the load management, with all the things you and I have been critical of, and I think for all the right reasons, I don't know that these ratings are going to get much better than this little bit of a bump back that they did, which makes me wonder, is the NBA really worth these valuations? I mean, especially compared to what the NFL has when they've got record every single year, Super Bowls that are off the charts, hundreds of millions of people watching. And meanwhile, the NBA, those numbers get beat by the combine. I mean, so you tell me. I think Lazary might be selling the top here right now, and I think Haslam probably doesn't care, but nonetheless, he might be buying the top. What do you think, John?
Well, I think you're exactly right. Again, Pete and I have done the math on this one, folks. It doesn't make any sense. The NBA, there are 30 teams. They get collectively about $2 billion from the TV contract. They get a little more here and there, but let's focus on the big numbers. So that comes out to roughly $140 million per team. And then if they sold out their 45 home games and sold them out for, pick a number. I know that there are skyboxes, and I know that there are more expensive seats on the floor. I also know nobody except the Lakers sells out every effing game. So with that said, if you looked at the numbers and said, okay, let's say you have a 17,000 seat stadium, 45 games times $200 or $300, yeah, you're a little over 200 million all in. You know what the average salary is in the NBA for a team, not individual players? 130 mil. So you're netting in the neighborhood of $70 million. Okay, 70 million, and this guy's paying 3.3 billion, and he might not even own all the shares of the Bucks. Makes no sense at all. It's a 2% return on your money. If you guys want 2% return, you can give it to me all day, and I'll get you 20. But 2% for $3 billion, that dog does not hunt. So that's my problem with this, Pete, is that they're overpaying like crazy. It's all on the come. And I don't know that basketball is making that big of a breakout, quite frankly.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I think it's ego and wanting to have these trophies. And that's been part of it anyway. We all know that. I mean, but the NFL, those numbers are real, and those numbers continue to get better and better and better. And I continue to think that they likely will, at least for a while. At some point, maybe not. But at this point, absolutely moving to the upside. John, let's jump to the combine. Now, we talked about this a little bit yesterday. Okay. We said we're going to probably talk about it all week because this is a monster week, and a lot of things can change based upon the combine itself. And is that right? I responded to somebody yesterday, John, on Twitter, where I said they ought to look at film for at least 80% of what they are giving each player that they're analyzing. And maybe the combine gives like a 20 percentile in terms of, okay, the guy's a little bit faster or a little bit slower than we thought. And that might affect the 80% of what you saw when you watch the film. Because what it comes down to is you're still a football player. Now, so here's right now, I'm giving you, and we'll go through 3 different positions real quick, John, but quarterbacks, CJ Stroud, Bryce Young, Will Levis. That's your top 3 right now in whatever order. Most likely Bryce Young. A lot of people seem to put him there. But will that be the same order? And I'm going to give you my answer of, John, is no. I think somebody slides up there somewhere, probably above Levis, but Anthony Richardson, maybe, the kid from Florida we talked about. Tanner McKee, the kid from Stanford that doesn't get talked about, but he's a 6'6", 230-pound kid with a hell of an arm. And then there's Hendon Hooker, the kid who unfortunately tore up his knee playing at the University of Tennessee, but had an unbelievable season going. I'd even throw in an Aiden O'Connell from Purdue who can kind of do it all. But who do you think? Is there somebody that slides in there, John, or is that top 3 going to stay that top 3? What do you think?
Probably stays the top 3, but I'll throw Will Lewis from Kentucky in, Pete, because, this is one of those guys that Pete has accurately said is a great prospect, but throws too many interceptions. And he does that, Pete, because he can throw the ball into that box. In other words, when you're looking at second level, third level down the field, in other words, not the 15 or the 8 to 12 yard outs and things like that, but that 30-yard pass, that 40-yard pass that needs to be like right into the mailbox, he can do that. And the problem is that he knows he can do that, and he will force that ball into small spaces like that. He's really good. I think that if he, Pete, had some outstanding numbers at the combine, obviously they don't, it's not a pro day. It's not like he's out there throwing that much. This is for speed, this is for lifting and all that kind of stuff. But he's a big, strong kid with a lot of arm strength. So I would say Will Lewis of Kentucky would be my quarterback sleeper in there.
Yeah, I think that there are always some sleepers, and I think that sometimes you can start to see them as people start to go into the combine, maybe for the right reasons in some cases, especially quarterback position sometimes as they get a chance to take a look. How about Quentin Johnson from TCU at wide receiver? Jordan Addison from USC, Jackson Smith, he's got another name to it as well, from Ohio State. Those are your top 3. I think a kid named Josh Downs from North Carolina, John, can slip in there and maybe jump in above at least one of those 3. And the reason I say it is he's a kid that nobody really talks about. He's not very big. Not everybody follows North Carolina football. They certainly follow basketball. But this kid's a little bit smaller, yet he's got 200 catches, John, and he's gone for over 2,300 yards in the last 2 years. I mean, this is a touchdown machine as well. He's got 19. So I think this is a guy that if he can put up any kind of numbers and impress people, he might leapfrog into that top 3.
Well, this guy's probably not going into the top 3, Pete, but Jalen Hyatt. Yes. I know you've talked a lot about great tight ends like the one at Purdue. This is a wide receiver. And guess where? He's at Tennessee. And it did hurt him and Tennessee, by the way, when the quarterback went down. But this guy is a beast. I think he's going to be playing at this next level, Pete. He is not the 6'4" guy that runs with that 4.35 speed or something, but all he does is catch everything you throw at him. So 6 foot, pro measured, 6 foot, 185. I'd say watch him because a couple games that I saw Tennessee play in, Pete, he can get separation. And that's one of the things that the combine isn't really going to show you because, yeah, raw speed, you can see it at the combine. But can that kid cut and get away from the defensive back when he makes that cut rather than having the D-back be all over him because his hips are too easy to read. This is one of those guys, again, Jalen Hyatt like the hotel.
Yep. Like him a lot. The kid was a great player, unbelievable last year. And like you said, kind of fell off a little bit when the quarterback situation reminds me of like a Stephon Diggs, where he's not big. That part's not going to impress you, but a hell of a receiver who can do a lot of different things. Last one, John, we've got the edge rushers. And Will Anderson, of course, number one. That guy's a freak show from Alabama like I have never seen before. He's really more of a linebacker who gets on the outside like a Lawrence Taylor type, and, you know, same sort of size and everything. So I think that kid's unbelievable. Tyree Wilson, unbelievable out of Texas Tech. And lastly, you've got Miles Murphy out of Clemson. But, John, there's a kid at Iowa, this kid Lucas Van Ness, who's got size, he's got speed, he's got strength, he brings it from the outside, and who always sits somewhere in the top 1, 2, or 3 in all of defense every single year? It's Iowa. They find these kids, John, somewhere in the farmlands of the Dakotas, Minnesota, Iowa, Wisconsin, or whatever. But this big kid can get after it as well. I think after he runs, and if he can run a decent 40, which I think he can based upon what we've seen on the field, he might slide up into that top 3 as well, because everybody needs an edge rusher. Everybody's got to have pressure on the quarterback, so they're all looking for him. I think the top 2 are definitely locks, but the third, there might be a spot in there for a guy like Van Ness.
Very well could be. I'll throw one out to you, Pete, because Keon White at Georgia Tech.
Yeah.
Now, if this kid would have played at Georgia, everybody'd know his name. But he went to Georgia Tech. That's not, you know, a slam on him or Georgia Tech, but I'm just saying at Georgia, everybody'd know him because he stands out when you watch this kid run, because as an edge rusher, he's 6'5", almost 6'6", Pete. And the fact that he was at Georgia Tech means he's probably a little smarter, more cerebral than some of the players that we're talking about, because Georgia Tech's a tough school, folks. Yeah. I'm not saying that football players get pushed as hard as every other player, but this guy, 24 years old, Pete, so he's already a man. Some of these guys Pete refers to are man-childs because they're 21 or 20 years old or things like that. This kid is one of those 24-year-old full-grown man. So when he's coming from the outside, edge rusher, I think this is a guy that people really will take note of in the draft. And if his 40 times surprise Pete, he jumps up to that almost Will Anderson level.
Yeah, he is a stud. He's big. You're right. He's at Georgia Tech. I love that kid too. I had him on my list when we were kind of looking around at some of this stuff. And you know what? We all lose sight of that quarterback from Georgia who, I don't know, what did he do? Throw just about nothing but touchdowns, win a national title a couple times. And somehow he gets lost in the shuffle of it, you know, and that type of thing happens as well. Maybe he can show something as well at the combine that gets his name back up there and somebody starts talking about him. Anyway, John, I love it. And the combine is going to start up pretty quick here, and then we'll start to see where everything starts to separate out.
Yep. Linebackers and D-line or edge rushers like the ones we're talking about, I think start on Thursday, Pete, 3 p.m. Eastern time. And I was mistaken. I said ESPN. It's the NFL network where you're going to get the best coverage, really.
Yep.
All right. Well, I got to jump on an airplane tomorrow, folks. So Pete's going to be here with Mark Lopresti. And I know you're looking forward to that. Mark's had some great picks, including, I think, AutoZone. Advanced Auto Parts, I think it was. It was either that or AutoZone. They were both up today, and he had those. Make sure you tune in. 1 p.m. Eastern time tomorrow. I'll be back with 3 at 3 in just what? Hour and a half, Pete. Bang.
Yep, bang.
Introducing our new series of intimate in-person trading conferences in some of the greatest cities in America. It's Market Rebellion Live. Next up, this June in Sonoma County, California. Savor some of the finest wines in America while you level up your trading with Pete Najarian, John Najarian, AJ Monty, Ryan Mastro, and Bill Johnson. Sonoma is limited to just 25 seats to ensure every guest gets personal attention, so act now. Tickets are going fast.